Hi, it's Patrick. In this video, I'm going to focus on the web accessibility project. So this project has a lot of flexibility, but the main goal is for you to research some aspect of web accessibility. This can be anything from screen readers to accessibility to mobile devices, you name it. A lot of flexibility, and even in the course, in the module in Moodle, there are a number of different topics that you might use. But the idea is to focus on the first part of the web page, talking about web accessibility or whatever aspect you're actually focusing on, and then the rest of it focusing on actually having some links and then description of each of the links that you provide. So you have to do some upfront research. And then with that, we want to have you spend some more time with some different aspects of web development, namely, named acres so you can jump through the page, as well as adding some styles to your links themselves. So in this video, I'm going to show you quickly how to do this. I'm going to open Dreamweaver. I'm using Dreamweaver CC. Ever since Adobe started using the Creative Cloud subscription system, one of the things that happens is they'll push updates and things change regularly. So don't be surprised if your version of Dreamweaver looks a little differently. So I'm going to close this, dock this, and actually just bring this over. Well, first what I'll do, because you'll notice as you bring things, and if I bring this up here, it should snap right in. The other thing that I want to show you, and I keep learning new things about this new version of Dreamweaver every time I use it, but I'm going to go down to the properties, and originally the properties inspector is not docked, but like old versions, I really like it docked. So if you bring it over here, got to get it just right, and there it is. You see that blue line, and there it's docked. So that's the way I like to work. Play around too with some of these different views. You might like the design view. I tend to use this extract view is what they call it. So now I'm going to go to File, New. Make sure HTML5 is selected. Now the other thing I like to do right away is I like this design view. So I'm going to change from live view to design view. It's important that you kind of play with these and find out which way works best for you. The live view is very helpful, especially as you become more comfortable with Dreamweaver. But I find that if you're a beginner, you might find that working the design view is more helpful. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor over here and I'm going to make some space. Like before, I start with a container tag. So div ID equals container. And this is just basically a box, if you will, that I'm putting everything in. I'm going to clean this up. And the other thing, if we look at this example here, it's essentially one page. It's one page that really has a lot of content. And so there's these links that allow you to jump down throughout the page. But what we want is we essentially want a header up here. Perhaps for the learn description, we could put in a section here. We could possibly even put a navigation tag, and then we could probably do one section for the rest of this and then a footer. You could separate each out as sections, so there's really not a right way, and people kind of still haven't, web developers, there's not a lot of consensus yet. As always, you can use the insert panel over here, and so I can type header, put my cursor after it. I'm going to now do the navigation tag. I'm going to actually just use one section for the whole page just to simplify this, and then footer. Now I always like to kind of simplify this a little. Okay, so your code should look something like this. Notice how it's a body tag, and within the body tag I have a div tag, and then within that div tag I have a header, a nav, a section, and a footer. So yours should look something like this. I'm going to save this in my EDTECH 2 folder, specifically in my 502. The next thing I'm going to do while I'm thinking about it, and give a document title to my page. You'll notice it comes up right there. From this, I'm going to basically take a few minutes and I'm going to put in all the content that I have here. You should spend time doing the research on your own so you can add your own content. Your page shouldn't look exactly like this. This is just meant as a model to help you kind of see the basic idea of what we want you to do. So I'll be back in a minute with all of my content put in. Okay, now that I have all the basic text in, I'm going to save this, try to save regularly, and I'm going to preview this in Firefox. So you can see right now it's just a basic web page with a couple of HTML5 tags and my content. But from here I'm going to start adding a little more HTML. Specifically, I'm going to add my headings, and then I'm going to add my hyperlinks, and then we'll start focusing on our CSS. So I'm going to highlight my header, and then down here the HTML and the properties inspector, I'm going to do an H1 there. I'm going to make the rest of these H2 tags. So you notice sometimes this will happen where Dreamweaver doesn't know exactly where you want this H2. So I'm just going to bring this over. The real problem is when I copied and pasted my content from my word processor, Dreamweaver didn't get this paragraph tag. So I just added that, I fixed that. That looks good. The idea behind using headings is not only for accessibility, which you're learning about this week, but it's also just good for anyone for when they want to quickly scan a page. Okay, the next step is each one of these I'm going to make link to the website itself. So I'm going to go through, and you should have notes where you can do this yourself, but I'm going to, for each one of these tools that I have, I'm going to make them active links. Okay, so now I've gone through, I've added my content, I've made my links active. So then my next thing is I want to add these links up here. So essentially what you do is you need to go down, in this case I'm going to go down to each one of my headers, and if you want to look at, I'm going to right click and I'm going to look at the example. If I go down here, you'll notice the first H2 there isn't anything there, and the idea being that if you clicked on it, it wouldn't bring you that far. But you notice over here essentially there's this ID equals evaluation. And so what's happening up here is evaluation, basically # or hashtag evaluation allows you to jump down there. So let's actually see that in action. So now I'm down to evaluation. So what I'd want to do here, I'd want to add a meaningful ID. And so evaluation makes sense based on the header. You should think about that yourself. But then over here, what I should be able to do, go over here, # evaluation. Want to make sure there's no spaces. Want to make sure that the capitalization's the same. So I'm going to save this, and you should be able to in live view test it. See how that worked? But what I have a habit of doing is I just like to check it in a browser, and it worked just fine. So now basically I'm going to repeat those steps by doing one called, say, tips, maybe one called color, and then we're going to do the opposite down here. And so I'm going to go ahead and do these real quick, and then we'll do the last one. So then I'm going to repeat the steps up here, highlight what I want to be a link. So the last thing I want to do is I want to be able to make this back to the top link, allow the user to jump to the top of the page. So I need to go up to the top here, and I'm going to do it right here in my H1. So then I'm going to go down here, I'm going to highlight back to the top, I'm going to do it like that. So let's save all and preview. Okay, that worked. Let's go back to the top, worked. Okay. So now I have a fully working, functioning web page, and so I'm pretty happy right now. So now I'm just going to basically add some CSS to essentially develop something that looks like this. I'm not going to try to make this perfect or exactly like this example, but I want to just kind of give you a basic idea of how I go about doing this. And so I'm going to start with my container. I'm going to click on container, and over here I'm going to click on the CSS designer. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click the plus sign. I'm going to create a new file. Now I'm going to browse, and I'm going to actually go up. So I don't want to actually put it in my 502 folder. So I'm going to go back to my EDTECH 2 folder, and I'm going to go to my styles folder, and I'm going to open that, and this is where I'm going to call it accessibility. Okay, so you can see it created here. Right now it's blank. But if I go back, I'm going to make sure that's selected. I'm going to click plus sign, make sure container worked the way I want, and then down here I'm going to basically add some basic things to the container itself. Start by width. I'm going to still just do a fixed width. I'm adding some padding, 10 pixels all the way around. Okay, add a background color. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a border around it. Just going to do thin. I tend to do my borders pretty much the same, not that exciting. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the body tag. I'm going to click on accessibility. I'm going to click plus sign. Set the font family for the whole page. Font size 100%. I'm going to change my line height to 1.5 em. So that's just going to give me that spacing I want. I'm going to change the font color. And then the background of the page I'm going to do as... So what I do a lot of times, and let's preview this, I'll often change the background of my container to the body because it'll just add some contrast. It allows it to pop off the screen a little. I'm going to take a look at the width. I don't remember if I added a width to my container. So I'm going to click on my CSS file, bring this down, and I'm going to come over and so I do have a 960 width. That looks good. The thing I didn't do is I didn't add a margin. So I like to give a auto left and auto right to my margin. So I'm going to do margin left, and you notice right now I'm typing this in the code view because it's faster and I'm comfortable doing so. Okay, that looks good. So I'm going to go down to my H1, make sure accessibility, click plus sign, and it didn't get what I want, but that's okay. So I can just hit H1. I'm going to do a font size and I'm going to increase it to 1.8. And I'm going to change the color. That looks pretty good. You'll notice the size of my H2 is still pretty big, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to adjust that. Change the color of that. So you notice how when I changed it white, you can't see it. What I'm going to do, and I forgot to do as I did that, is I'm going to actually add a background. So if you look at the example, you'll notice that there has that background. So the white looks really good, that strong contrast off of that background. But right now, that's what I forgot to do. So I'm going to go back to my H2, I'm going to click on background color, and I'm going to add a background color. That looks pretty good. Now, I could work on my proximity, even though when you basically add a border or a background to a heading, it kind of helps visually chunk information. I still could work on my white space if I wanted to with that H2 tag. Okay, so now we're going to add some styles to the links themselves. So the way that I tend to do this is that the easiest way I think is to hand code this. So I'm going to make sure I'm in accessibility, and I'm going to go to the very bottom, and I'm just going to type a:/link curly brace. I'm going to type the color I want. Got to have that semicolon, and I'm going to do a curly brace at then, and then I'm going to add basically a hover, right? So a behavior when the mouse goes over it. So let's save all and let's preview. My links look good. You notice how when I mouse over, if you find that, it's showing up not the color that you want, what you can do, for instance, is like a new private window, or in Chrome, I do incognito, right? So everything shows up like I've never visited. So everything works the way I want. The last thing I would do is I would add possibly a little padding here with my H2 to the left, and I might actually make my footer a little smaller, and then I would validate and upload. In this case, the H2, I'm going to make sure it's selected. I'm going to go down, padding. It might be nice to add it all the way around. And then down here in the footer, I'm going to make sure footer selected, accessibility, plus sign, simplify that, and I'm going to go down to font size. Because I've been using M, I'll do 0.8. So in this case, I'm going to use the same color scheme as my background color. I'm going to go ahead and add my images for my validation badges. So they're in my image folder. I use the different colors this time, so put my CSS one, put my cursor over, repeat. Shift enter. And with footer selected, I'm gonna text align center everything. Okay, so before I upload this, I'm going to validate in Dreamweaver. No errors found, so that looks good. So now I'm going to upload it. I'm going to check it again. I'm going to then add those links to my validation badges. I'm going to make sure they open in a new window. And then I'm going to, after I do that, validate it once more and upload it to EDTECH 2. So then to find my page, I start by going to EDTECH 2. I type in my information, type in my account, and then I type in the 502 folder, and then whatever I named it, and it should come right up. Okay, it didn't come up, so it looks like I actually spelled accessibility wrong. So if I go back, and right click on my local one, I'm going to rename it, add an I, add a double C, update, re-upload, and there it is. So now I'm just going to validate it real quick. That looks good. And that looks good too. So basically what I would do at this point is I would add the refers back in Dreamweaver to my badges. I'd basically repeat similar steps for the HTML5, and then I'd re-upload, and I would check it once more to make sure everything looks great. Thanks.